Former CNN host Soledad O'Brien went on Face the Nation on Sunday and did a great job introducing the mainstream media to facts about discrimination.
I want to turn now to Soledad O'Brien. She's the executive producer and director of Black and Blue, which is part of her Black in America series on CNN. It focuses on the New York City Police Department and the Eric Garner case. You, Soledad, actually used this incident in New York as to kind of set the stage for this documentary to kind of survey what's going on in America. What did you find?
You know, it's interesting, even though the killing of Eric Garner opens our documentary, I think anybody who thinks that what is happening right now is only about Eric Garner or is only about Michael Brown is really missing what is happening in Black America. It was fascinating to hear the chief talk about what they're focused on. He used the words community, he talked about culture, he talked about transforming how you interact with people. What you're actually realizing is that those aren't the words that Commissioner Bratton used. He talked about retraining, he talked about cameras. It's a different philosophy. African Americans feel that they are treated differently in the criminal justice system. They are treated differently under the law. There is this aggressive targeting of Black people that doesn't happen in white communities. And it's that anger over so many years that is really percolating up now.
Do you think that's a valid feeling, that they are being treated differently?
Look at the statistics. If you look in New York City at stop and frisk, we measured between 2000, these are police numbers, but we looked at them for our documentary. Between 2002 and 2012, there were 5 million stops. 83% of those stops were Blacks and Latinos. 90% of those people who were stopped, 90%, that did not move on to an arrest. It did not move on even to a summons. Those people had done nothing. So 90% of the Blacks and Latinos that were stopped in stop and frisk in New York City didn't do anything. Imagine what that does psychically to a culture if you fit the description, which means you're Black, male, 19 to 25.
That makes me feel so happy that there's somebody who did their job. A CNN host, well, former CNN host, she used to have a show every morning, but she actually went after the establishment and powerful people, so they fired her. And now she only does a documentary every once in a while. But still, it's so nice in the mainstream media to have somebody go out there and say, all right, enough with the opinions. I don't care what you think. You don't care what I think. It's not about that. Here are some numbers. Specifically, she was talking about stop and frisk there. But also, the fact that I always bring up on the show is the drug inconsistencies between white people and Black people. How they use drugs at similar rates, but Black people get arrested 4 to 6 times more often. So why is that so important? Because it's very telling about who gets policed more. So it's an empirical fact who gets policed more. It's not like the only reason police go after Black people is because they're just doing more of the crime, as conservatives would have you believe. I just described to you, Black people and white people, according to studies, use drugs at the same rate. They even self-report using it at the same rate, but Black people get arrested 4 to 6 times more often. You can't brush that under the rug. You can't act like that's not the reality. You can't, put your head in the sand and say, whatever, it doesn't apply to me. And like Soledad's explaining right there, to do stop and frisk when we already have the evidence that says it has a 90% failure rate and you're wildly disproportionately stopping minorities, it's not fair, and it's a bad policy because it doesn't even work. 90% of the time, you're not getting the right people. And we all know why they're not going down to Wall Street and doing that to the bankers, because they have money and they have power. But we all know if you really do search some of the people on Wall Street, you'll find numbers to 42 different brothels in the area, which is illegal. But are they going to crack down on that? Probably not, because, again, it's high-profile people who are doing it. You'll find cocaine on them. I mean, in the 1980s, Wall Street was arguably the cocaine capital of the world. Every investment banker on Wall Street in the 1980s was high out of their fucking mind, just gacked all day long. Oh, had the drip going on in the back of their throat. Don't ask me how I know about this, by the way. This is a different conversation for another day. But it's nice to finally have somebody go out there and lay out the reality in a take-no-prisoners way And also, let me add a little bit to that too, because there's an aspect of how police function in the U.S. that white people, honestly, a lot of them just don't know. Like, they're well-meaning people and they're not racist, but they don't know because they don't know the experience of black people in America. And it's the idea that if you live in a community that's an overwhelmingly minority community, you are going to have police just patrolling there more, regardless of, they would argue, well, it's just because the statistics show that this is the more dangerous place. Well, wrong. You've made that a self-fulfilling prophecy because you only look for crimes in that area. And again, you're not looking for crimes in the more affluent white areas. I've told you guys my story 1,000 times on the show, how I was friends with white people, black people, Latino people, everybody. And in high school, if you go to a party on the white side of town, no cops would ever drive by. If you go to a party on the Latino side or the black side, the cops are patrolling all over the place. So they're looking for crime in that specific area, which explains why they're arresting those people disproportionately. It's not necessarily because they're doing more crime. It's because that's where the cops are looking. But remember, there's more proof of racism than just this. I mean, the resume study is a big one. When you have a traditionally sounding black name on a resume, you get hired way less than if it's a traditionally sounding white name. The bicycle study, how there was an investigative report from a press outlet where they had a bike chained up and there would be a white girl who tried to unchain it and was having trouble. And people would literally ask her if she needed help. Oh, do you need help with your bike, ma'am? When it's a white guy and the bike's on a chain, people don't help the white guy, but they just pass right by. They don't care that this dude is struggling with a bike chain. When it's a black guy who's struggling with a bike chain, everybody automatically assumes he's stealing it. It's the perception. This is the problem, the perception of society at large. And I'm not even necessarily blaming any individuals. It's just this mass, not psychosis, but this mass underlying assumption or presumption where it manifests itself in this negative way, which is clearly discriminatory. There's an eBay study where a black hand held an iPod and a white hand held an iPod, and the white hand got virtually all the hits, and all the other information was the same, price, you name it. So just seeing the color of the skin, that's the only different factor. People go, I'm going to go to the white guy. The car study also, there was a big viral YouTube hit where this guy was breaking into a car. Like, you know the thing when they come with, if you lock your keys in your car, as I've done 9,000 times, where they have this tool where they pop it open? So there was a white guy doing that to his car. Okay, people didn't care. They looked at him once and then they just were like, whatever, and they walked away. In fact, a cop drove by, didn't stop the guy for a second, because they just assumed it's got to be his car and he's trying to get his keys out of his own car. But when his black friend did it, you want to guess what happened? People immediately called the cops. They were staring at him like he's a criminal. Oh boy, he's probably dangerous. Then the cop showed up, they slammed him against the wall and put the cuffs on. This is the problem, man. There are perceptual differences in how white people are viewed and how black people are viewed. And the good news is that with this younger generation, we're definitely moving away from that, and we are much more liberal and open-minded and tolerant, and we don't really see the world in these very rigid, racist kind of ways. But the more important fix to the situation is you have to fix the system, because there are systemic problems, and it in a certain way, it doesn't even matter how good of a person you are individually and how well the younger generation feels about the issue as individuals. What matters is reforming the system to make it more fair, more open, more just, more equal.